I would like to say thanks to a few organizations and people who have helped make this series possible. First of all, our chapter sponsors, which are TEDCO, and TEDCO is the quasi public-private partnership with the state of Maryland to advance innovation and also to advance and accelerate the transfer of technology out of our federal and state government. The second one is a prominent law firm here by the name of Gordon Feinblatt. We want to thank them for their support and their interest in being part of the program. We would also like to thank 360 Venture Management Group. Without their help and support, we would not be doing what we're doing today. With that, I'd also like to thank a few partners. First of all, Atlantis Partners, who are our direct partner in helping produce this series. Maryland Innovation Center, which when we do our in-person events is where Startup Grand Maryland generally holds their events. To a close partner and a close working relationship with Founder Institute in Washington, D.C.'s chapter. Also, chapter team members, Web Access Media, and the Patent Insider. And without saying a whole heck of a lot more, because we have a lot of great information to share tonight, I am going to turn the microphone and the event over to my two co-producers, Mr. Luke Pillarella and Mr. Connor Boundy, both of Atlantis Partners, and they are going to be your guides and your tutors through the balance of this evening. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and be part of history. Thanks, everyone. Connor, take it away.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Bridging the Gap to Web3. It's crazy to believe that we are already 6 episodes deep. My name is Connor Boundy. I'm one of the co-founders here at Atlantis Capital. I'm here with our other co-founder, Luke Pillarella, and we are really excited to dive into a great discussion today. As we get started, I have to give a huge shout out to our partners that have made this series possible. Some of those partners are Startup Guides, Safe Haven, Dominant Creative, VChain, Mad V Apes, Shoes 53045, MetaJuice, ABC FinTech, Industrial Outdoor Venture, BHR, and Data Nexus. The list is growing, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I able to come through all right? Connor, can you hear me good?
You are good.
Perfect. Happy to be back. Welcome everybody for tuning in to episode 6. I hope everybody is doing well on this Monday evening in Chicago here. It's a little wet and gloomy out there, but we are heading into springtime, which is always exciting. If you didn't join us on our last episode, we had a really great conversation bringing together Matt Andelman from ABC FinTech and Anthony De Laurentiis from Industrial Outdoor Ventures, talking about how Web3 technology is really disrupting and innovating within the real estate industry. You know, we covered topics such as tokenization of real estate assets and how you can further involve individuals in the investing and financing perspectives. We talked about the importance of streamlining their back office functions, and we even covered some challenges for growth ahead and how both Matt and Anthony think we can get beyond those challenges and really see this technology take full fruition into what its capabilities are. If you weren't able to join us live, go out there on YouTube, Bridging the Gap to Web3, and find that episode recording. Leave us a comment, give us a like, give us a share. We want to hear from you about what other topics you want to see us dive deeper into.
Yeah, I think last episode was a lot of fun. I mean, Matt and Anthony were fascinating to listen to. I mean, I personally am super interested of the topic of real estate just because about it, and hearing about some of those innovations was awesome. And I think it was a perfect lead up to the episode today, just because we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the real estate industry. I mean, sure, we're going to take a different angle today. We're going to look at kind of data accessibility and what that looks like. And with how last episode went, I think we're in for a treat here. I mean, we've got 2 amazing speakers that are joining us. And to be honest, I think this could be a 4-hour episode if we wanted to.
I couldn't agree more. There are so many synergies that align these two individuals, and I'm really excited to get their thoughts on this topic because it is extremely important and relevant for a lot of us that aren't only interested in real estate, but are interested in a plethora of other industries that data accessibility plays a key part of. And so both of these speakers, they're part of innovating teams that are really making a difference and creating waves of momentum across various industries, right? We got BHR that's very much tailored to real estate, and we got Data Nexus, which is more focused on just the access to data. But I know that Derek has a special place in his heart for real estate, so it's gonna be awesome to get these two together. So without further ado, let's bring our speakers up here and let's get them introduced. So it's my pleasure, to introduce these two exciting guests who are really at the forefront of technology within what we like to call Web 2.5 and Web 3. And so, our first guest is Derek Meyer. Derek has an extensive background in the energy industry as a database administrator and has since, transitioned into Web 3, where he's found multiple ways to utilize his expertise in building data solutions that are really alternatives to those siloed information hubs that are key to big technology today. Derek is the CEO and co-founder of Data Nexus, which is a Web3 data and infrastructure provider that works with a plethora of applications to help store information regarding interactions with their smart contracts. And in addition, Data Nexus is one of the distributed list of providers on the Graph protocol. And what the Graph is it's a global API and indexing protocol for establishing blockchain data. Derek, it's great to have you here with us today. Welcome to Bridging the Gap to Web3.
Thanks. Yeah, super fun to be here. As you mentioned, real estate is something that I enjoy kind of outside of my crypto life, but that's largely just because there's so much that we have to do in order to incorporate it into that life. And I think there's a lot of great people that are working on solving that problem, and there's a lot of good challenges for us to overcome. And once we do, it's gonna be awesome.
I cannot wait, and we're going to start unpacking that today, right? And that's what brings us to introducing our second speaker of the day, who is Zach Gorman. And Zach is a seasoned entrepreneur with over 12 years of experience in building successful startups and brands. In 2017, Zach brought his extensive knowledge and experience to co-found Torrey Homes, where he successfully led teams across product, marketing, and operations, generating millions of dollars in revenue. Currently, he is the CEO and co-founder of Blockchain Home Registry, better known as BHR, which we'll be referencing quite frequently today, which is really a company that's aimed at addressing one of the most pressing issues within the real estate industry, and that's the reliability and availability of data. A BHR allows all owners of homes to claim a unique, verified NFT or non-fungible token attached to their physical real estate, providing homeowners with the privacy-controlled access to a permanent, transferable historical record of their home or house. Zach, it's a pleasure to have you join us. Welcome to the episode. How are you doing today?
Good, Luke. Thank you for having me. Super excited to dig in here.
We're going to have a lot of fun today, guys. And I think that our audience is a little bit curious to learn about what you both do. And I think what both of you do is fascinating. And so let's start with you, Derek. Can you tell us a little bit more about Data Nexus? What's the company's role in Web3, and what even inspired you to build it in the first place?
Yeah, it gets into ones and zeros real quick, right? So when when I'm talking to my wife, and my wife, she's a hairdresser, right? And so we come from she in my world, she does all of our designs, all that type of stuff for our house and all that stuff, and she's incredible. I'm more of the I'll make things work, that type of a thing. And so that tends to be where my mindset's at, and we complement each other well. But same is true on the blockchain side. When I first came across Ethereum, it was actually in 2016 when Coinbase was launching the token, right? And I had already been running Bitcoin miners and stuff like that, and I was trying to figure out oh, this is a programmable blockchain, and that was fascinating to me, but I didn't really have a way to contribute to that. and I didn't really know, okay, well, how can I do something? How can I, make this more valuable, make it more usable, and help myself and others benefit from it. And so I couldn't really figure out exactly what that was. And so I kind of, let that become kind of a side interest or a hobby as I continued, more with my database track in the tech industry. And then eventually I came across the graph ecosystem, which, real simply, if with the blockchain, you have all these different applications that are writing transactions to the blockchain, right? And if you could imagine having, 1,000 different companies, right, in the Web2 world that were all writing to the same database, you kind of run into a problem where you're getting all this bloating occur, and you have all of this information, but you have no way to curate it and no way to understand what's important, what's not. And so what the graph does is we help identify what information is important, and then we transform that information into something that's really easy for applications to consume and give their users a better user experience. So all of that was like, oh, that's my wheelhouse, right? That's what I do. And so, so when I first came across that protocol, I was like, cool, this is something that I can, dig into and help grow the ecosystem, help new applications that are experiencing data problems. And that's why we, took the initial plunge to start our company. And then from there, we've just started to add on more infrastructure related services that, is a natural complement. We're already running, nodes for multiple different blockchains, running validators and things like that is just kind of an easy complement to it.
It's amazing. I mean, what you all do is so important to the growth of this entire space. And I think that sometimes people take it for granted just because we've grown up, with an index in a book, a table of contents. You've got Command F, you've got Google that, will give you the best search results when you go find something. But when you've got this new world of information and all of it's there, Google doesn't exist. You don't have that table of contents. You can't go Command F and find something. And that's what your team has been bringing to the world of Web3 and allowing people to that they're actually searching for. I think that it's such a simple concept when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, but the complexity, like you're saying, those zeros and ones, once we start diving into those details, oh my gosh, technical expertise and just understanding that you have of how this industry is truly moving forward and why it's so important is, I think, something that we're going to talk a little bit more about today, but something that in my initial conversations with you, the team, and looking at the graph has just gotten me personally fascinated. I mean, in transparency, Luke and I, investors in the graph protocol, we've been strong supporters for a long time just because we've seen, we've seen, I mean, if we want to see this space grow, we need to be able to go find the information within it. And so, speaking of finding information, speaking of benefits, BHR, Zach, you're doing some pretty amazing stuff too. And you're solving kind of one of these issues we're talking about here, reliability and availability of data. But we're a little bit specific in the real estate industry. Can you share with us what BHR has been doing and how you and your team came up with this idea?
Yeah, happy to, Connor. And I'll try not to go too far back in time, but just I think it's helpful for context. My co-founder and I started a prop tech company, which Luke mentioned earlier, Torrey Homes, in 2017. And the real, vision of Torrey Homes was just making the process of buying, selling, owning homes easier. I'm sure anybody in this room, in this chat, knows somebody or they themselves has gone through that process. And without, drawing out the point too much, it's really painful. There are so many moving parts. There are so many different providers involved, and the industry is incredibly archaic. So, one of our big experiences, and high level on Torrey Homes, that was a tech-enabled brokerage business. We built some really interesting machine learning models to help people find the right home faster, and sort of a holistic ownership platform to take them through every step of the process, from the search through the actual purchase and sale, and then through to close into the actual ownership of the property itself, as well as some back office software to help real estate agents be more performant, do better, do more deals, et cetera. And, after building that company for 5 years, getting it profitable, we we just kept encountering the same issue over and over again, and that was data accessibility. Again, you have so many different providers who are very, let's say, resistant to opening up that data. There's a lot of folks who really just want to maintain the status quo. And the ramifications of that are really serious, both at an industry level for the different organizations and companies that are trying to build in the space, as well as on a consumer level. So to sort of break that down, on the industry side, in startup land, as I'm sure many here can sort of understand, we would have instances where we were trying to get access to listing data just to display a property for sale on our website. And that could take us 6 months and, extremely painful. And, that's not just 6 months of like actual work being done. That's a lot of just like being left on red, not getting those calls returned, waiting on contract negotiation, and a lot of stuff that's just really unnecessary. And anybody who's in startups understands that 6 months, that's a killer. That can be a death sentence for your company. And so again, on the industry side, we're just seeing this huge slowing of innovation in the space. And I think people really, they look at real estate, they look at prop tech, and they're like, wow, immense opportunity here, largest asset class in the world. Why is this industry so beleaguered and so resistant to change? And it just became so clear to us that it's a data problem. At least that's one of the large problems that exists. And then on the consumer side, without, again, going too far down this rabbit hole, the ramifications of that for a consumer are that there's a lot of information about this, large asset that you really don't have any idea about until you get either to the point of sale when you're too far in and can't really turn away, or worse yet, once you've actually gone through the sale and you're owning the house. And it just leads to this, really unfortunate experience for something that's supposed to bring a lot of joy. The home is this place where you're supposed to manifest, self-actualize, like feel at home, but the experience of home ownership can really end up being painful, reacting to a lot of things that sort of come up along the way and can cause you a lot of chaos in your life. So that's sort of the pain points that we really identified while building Tori, and that led us to build BHR. And just the high level on BHR is we're building a platform and protocol that enables access to all data around residential real estate in the US. Over time, that could then become commercial, it could be land. The application, the framework, I think, has a lot of potential for growth. We're just really focused on the residential space right now because that, has been much more so than commercial, really wholly neglected in terms of trying to fix these kinds of problems.
I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. And, before we kind of dive into things here, Derek, your reaction when Zach was talking about people holding data in this space sounded like that kind of struck home with you a little bit. Have you been seeing some of the same things, I assume?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have seen that exact same thing in the real estate industry, just because I haven't been like, in the real estate industry, I'm a homeowner. Like I own my house and I own investment properties and stuff like that. And so I'm more of a consumer on that side. But I just think that in the, the Web 2 world, or the, world outside of blockchain, there's kind of this idea that if you can get your hands on this mound of information and build a moat around it, then you're golden, right? And that's kind of the strategy that a lot of companies take, which is, that's largely true.
Yeah.
But it's a, I don't want to say like it's selfish or it's wrong or anything like that, but when you look at the overall humanity, like what could we create if that data was well known? Like what things are we not getting to benefit from because no one else has access to that? And and that's something that Web3 is obviously aiming to solve. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be here is because I think it's just going to propel humanity forward faster if we do a good job of this.
Yeah, and just
Yeah.
a one note on that as well. Part of our sort of philosophy at BHR is, not only making this better for the industry and all of the players that are already existing, new companies coming up, but again, as the consumer, the homeowner, one of the things we noticed over and over again is that you own the home, but you don't own any of the data around the home. And I think we're at this really specific point in time where people are understanding that data is something that has been held hostage for many people for, across all verticals. And with something like your home, it's baffling that you don't have access to it. You don't even have the knowledge about it. But then also that data is just being used sort of without your permission in many different ways. So one of our goals with BHR is to, empower homeowners to take ownership of that actual data, use it to make more informed decisions, of course, with how they live in the home, how they build equity. But, and we can get into this more later, but actually figure out ways for homeowners to be compensated and actually monetize the data around their home if they choose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know myself, being a recent homeowner and in the market for an additional property, the amount of people that I have to talk through and the hurdles I have to jump through to just get presented with the information to make an informed decision about where I want to make my next purchase is just a huge pain. And it's almost like, how many times do I want to do this again? Right. It's like I've done this once, I've done it twice. Do I really want to try for a third? I don't know. And Zach, to your point there, right? You're kind of out there almost trying to incentivize individuals to give you their data, right? And say, hey, you own this, let us display it, and we'll provide you that information. Correct? Is that kind of in a gist, the way that you're gathering that information?
Yeah, we're sort of, it's a multi-pronged approach. On some level, this is a collaborative effort between us and the existing legacy players in the space. There's part of this is just, we know that the data is out there, it's just fragmented or it's siloed. And so we're out there making those partnerships to actually bring in all of those different verticals, because we want this not to just, this is not like Zillow or Redfin or even an MLS. Like, this is any piece of data that touches an address, whether that's, permits, zoning, environmental hazards. Like, we want the whole breadth to be fully encompassed here. So one side of it is bringing in all of these existing providers and creating this sort of collaborative environment and protocol that everybody can contribute to and build on top of. And then the other side, the sort of more consumer facing, is, there's a lot of information that just isn't available because it's in the home. And, it is only the homeowners are the ones really able to see that information. So we've created this really interesting sort of rewards mechanism on our platform that says to the homeowner, hey, it is just good housekeeping to have all of the information about your property in one place, rather than distributed across receipts, manuals, emails, fax machines in some cases, which is makes me shudder. But let's bring all of that in one place so that you can just have access to it, because it becomes really meaningful for you when you're looking to sell, to be able to provide as much information as possible. You can imagine over time that the more high fidelity of a record you have about your property, you can mitigate things like inspection contingencies for potential buyers, and help really facilitate a much more smooth process, purchase process itself. But again, and we don't have to go all the way on this side, but as homeowners add information, whether that's maintenance history, appliances, information around all of those different features in their house, we reward them for that. And they're able to use that to purchase more premium data from some of the providers we have on the platform. And over time, we spoke with a large company on the home warranty side, and there's real value in this data, and they're willing to pay for it. And so, I don't expect anybody to quit their jobs just because they've uploaded data about their property on our website, but it does become really compelling when you can get, if that's just one provider in one vertical, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands, of opportunities there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I was going to say,
Derek.
my wife and I, so we just moved into this house in December, right? And so, the first year, I feel like you're just kind of getting to know the house type of thing, like early stages of a relationship. And, simple things like our water heater had a clock on it where it was only on for during certain time periods. And the previous owner said that to where our water heater was only on for 4 hours. And it took us forever to figure out, why is our water, not hot? And so we had to we called someone out to inspect the water heaters, and it turns out they were fine. Just on the other side of the house, there was this clock that we needed to say, hey, just let water stay hot all day long. But being able to have a record of, hey, we installed a new water heater. It was installed on this date. This was the company that came and installed it. Here's their phone number if you need to, ask them any questions. That to me, just as a home buyer, is super useful, because I'm like, great, I don't know a lot about this house, but here's a bunch of people that are familiar with it. So just kind of giving a +1 on that one.
Oh, I mean, that's talk about a real world situation
Yeah.
that you can exactly feel the pain points that Zach is working to solve. And Zach, I thought it was interesting how you're discussing pulling this information from these multiple different silos, right, to make this comprehensive single source of truth. And Derek, I think that's really similar to kind of what you're doing at Data Nexus, right? Pulling this information together to make it easily accessible for developers or creators when they're creating their applications. Can you share a little bit more around how Data Nexus does this? How do you pull kind of these disparate sources of information and make it really easy to use and provide value at the end of the day to end consumers? Curious if you could shed some light on that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that term that you use, which is really common in the data industry, is having a single source of truth, right? Which that's something that I could go on for a long while about, especially when it comes to real estate and county public records and all that type of stuff. Anyway, so like with a blockchain, we consider that the blockchain is our single source of truth. If it happens on the blockchain, it's true. If there's a transaction that says that you sent tokens to your friend, well, you did, right? Even if you didn't want to, it's there, and that's what happens. That is the source of truth. And so, that's kind of how we all agree that something is accurate, right? And so what we do is we run multiple nodes, and it's a special type of node called an archive node, where we store the totality of the history, right? If you wanted to run an Ethereum validator, you can run kind of a light version where it doesn't require the totality of history. And so we run these archive nodes for various chains, which typically that's terabytes worth of data, depending on the chain and transactions. And so what we do is, people will kind of define like, hey, this is X, Y, and Z is important information to us. And so we'll go through and then we'll go back in time 3 years or 6 months or whenever the contract was first deployed, and we'll say, okay, great, let's progress through time and capture all of the information. That way we can have an accurate present representation of what their data is. And certain things are really tough to do at a blockchain level in terms of computation. Like as an example, if you wanted to figure out someone's APR or APY, depending on the protocol. It gets to be kind of a complex calculation of like, okay, well, how do you compute that? You need to figure out, what a person's entry was, how many rewards they had over what period of time, and then annualize it and all that type of stuff. And that's just not something you're going to do on the blockchain, right? Maybe those 3 data points you put on the blockchain, but you're gonna calculate that outside of the blockchain and display it to someone. And so that's kind of what we do, is we'll help store that information. And then because our data, our databases are not on the blockchain, it's just completely derived by the blockchain, we can still do all of that compute. That way, when someone loads a website, all of the computational work is already done, and you're just saying, you're asking my servers, hey, what's the APR? And I say 6%.
Yeah, much more efficient, right? Effective than somebody trying to go out there and pull those individual data pieces, right? Those variables, and create the calculation themselves, right? That seems a bit of a tough process for the normal person to go through, the layman to go through. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And giving kind of a more real world example, kind of on topic, like let's say that we were storing every home sale on the blockchain, right? You might want to know, like, okay, well, how many homes were sold in I'm from Tampa, so how many homes were sold in Tampa that were 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and what is the lowest price, the highest price, what's the median, what's the mean? And you might want to know those pieces of information. Well, if you were running an application where you had to then go search the entirety of the blockchain to say, okay, great, what was sold in Florida, that's going to take a while. And then if the guy next to me also has the same question, you got to re-go through that process. And so what we do is we as new blocks get confirmed with the blockchain, we listen to that information. We say, oh, hey, a new house in Florida was sold. Let's change that 37 to a 38, and log all of our information. And that way it's ready for users as they go to access pages.
One thing I want to jump in here with, just because I'm going at it a little different angle here, but from the renter side of things, like something like an apartments.com type entity, I think is what people are probably thinking of right now when they're thinking of what you're talking about. However, that type of entity, all of the time, I think everybody listening back to this can think of examples where they've been looking at a property and that is not the details of the property. Heck, that property was sold a year ago and they're just listing it there. So the real estate agent can get you to call the property and they go, no, that one's not available, but the one over here is. How many times does that happen? Over and over and over again. This is a way to avoid all of that happening, to go around it, to know that when you're looking at that property, you're looking at that house, like you were saying, when it's on the blockchain, it's the source of truth. Well, that actually was there. That visit, that water heater, update, that happened at that date that was recorded. You can't go back and mess with that. Versus this, apartments.com, somebody going and displaying something, we're going to manipulate the data a little bit here so that we can extend it a little bit, bring in some more potential customers, and see if we can get them into a different home.
Yeah, Connor, I couldn't agree with you more there. And that's also like, as we've been building, we've been really taking, precautions around not just saying, okay, one data source, move on. Like when we say like, we're assembling the corpus of real estate data, that isn't just one from here, one from there. It's everything possible because as you're saying, there's a lot of market manipulation that happens on, real estate websites. Just recently Zillow updated their estimate just all of a sudden, zero transparency around what was adjusted. People's numbers went up, they went down. And, at the end of the day, most consumers are just looking to find out how much is that home worth. But when you need to, like, I think it's important to question yourself, as a thoughtful consumer and say, why is it worth that much? And so for us, it's far more interesting to say, here's not one, not two, but all available AVMs, for a particular home. And it's not just for the value of the home, around, you could think about it, same thing for climate risks.
Calculating taxes.
Yeah. There's just so much information that, even again, on some of these larger real estate listing websites, sometimes because their customer actually isn't the consumer, it's the real estate agents paying for ad space on that platform. If a property's not doing well and they pull it off market, that information is recorded somewhere else, but it's not going to be visible on the site. And again, that's because the interests, you think when you're on those websites as a consumer that you're the customer, but you're not. So
I made that mistake the first time.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would never know. And so for us, this is so much about allowing people to have that extra layer of transparency and education around what they're looking at, because, the industry needs it. It's desperate for it at this point.
Yep. Yeah. And so Zach, when we first started kind of talking, you were describing BHR as this like web 2.5 type of company.
Love it.
Could you explain a little bit to our audience here? What does that mean to you, and how has that kind of shaped your team's experience while building BHR to where it is today?
Yeah, I would be interested in learning and hearing from more people what they think of that term, but it became really clear. We were looking at blockchain technology back when we started our first business, in 2017, even a little prior, because it's so clear that the applications of the real estate industry are, voluminous, and it just wasn't the right time. The market wasn't there. But as we started to really, build out BHR, we understood that right now Web3 is having, I think, a bit of a branding crisis and a branding problem. And it's really hampering the sort of next 1 billion users and user adoption. And this is by no means meant to say that there shouldn't be Web3 companies, but for what we're trying to do, it is sort of this bridge between two worlds. And we don't, for us, it's important not to ostracize the potential users and benefactors of what we're building by making this sort of a strictly Web3 company. The idea here is that we're bridging these two worlds, and we're using Web3 technology as the infrastructure behind that. But the experience of our product and the value of our product is not strictly just around the technology itself. I just think that it's important to sort of decouple from the stigma. Also, just because, again, Web3 is having a moment right now where many people, you ask anybody on the street, are more likely to associate it with scams than infrastructure and technology. So it's really just for us, it's good signal to help get people from, when we're thinking like, how are we actually going to get people from one step to the other and using this technology? For us, honestly, it means that the Web3 technology fades into the background. It's there, it's powering everything. And even moreover, the Maxi approach, while I appreciate it, and I think you need people sort of leading the charge to help, educate the masses and really bring things to the next level. For what we're building and the kinds of providers we're going to be working with, it's quite likely that we will always be building in parallel with centralized and decentralized infrastructure. It just makes sense. I think anybody who really steps back and thinks about like, how are we going to get governments and municipalities using this? How are we going to get large financial institutions using this, especially given what's been going on? You're going to need to create technology that can bridge the gap, and you can demonstrate the value over time and say, this is all powered by blockchain, or, but to us, it's clear that you need sort of both at the same time. So that's sort of the 2.5 of it all.
Yeah.
I'll say, go ahead, Derek.
Just kind of following up on that, because I would say that we're probably a little bit further on the tip of decentralization maxis. I don't know that I would necessarily call myself a maxi, but nonetheless, like anything that can be decentralized, I think should be. But at the same time, we're not naive in the sense that there are some things that need to have a sense of centralization. Like if you look at certain things that or certain products where you need to understand who a person's identity is, right? And you need to KYC that person, or things like that. You will need to have some type of a entity that can accomplish that. And I don't want to, as you put it really well, I don't want to ostracize any company that is interested in starting to utilize some, but not all aspects of the blockchain. I think that is a very acceptable thing to do, and I think that a lot of what we've been running into with Web3 is that, there's kind of this idea that you have to incorporate all or nothing type of thing. And that's just not true. It's, the contracts state that it's not true.
Right.
But I also think that a lot of people don't really understand, well, what are those attributes? People start building things that are dumb and not useful because they don't really understand, like, in what circumstances would I want to build something on the blockchain? What attributes or what new features could I incorporate into my company or my application or whatever by introducing the blockchain? And so it just becomes kind of this like, well, let's just make a token and hope people buy it type of thing. And it's like, wait, why? There's no need for that. Right. That doesn't do anything.
Yes.
And so being able to like help people understand, like, okay, what are you actually going to be doing here? That's something that I think is vastly overlooked, and I think we're going to start to see over this year a lot of the projects that didn't ask themselves those questions kind of falling out, and then I think we're going to see a lot more companies like BHR who do have kind of the that worked out start to really excel, which I'm really excited for.
Yeah, and it's also just things are still developing and the technology is still being built, so there are certain pieces, I totally agree, Derek, like there are certain pieces of what we're building where we're like, great, like we can make this, Web3 right now, and that's great. Yeah. But there are certain concerns we have around privacy, for instance. You wouldn't want necessarily to see your inspection report on chain and somebody can go read that and say, oh, Derek's back door's busted, I'm gonna go
did you guys handle those rodents?
So, like there are certainly things that we will introduce over time, but for us, I think the biggest takeaway is like we just want to be thoughtful with how we're building, and we want to make sure that everything is, there's no reason to rush. Like I think at this point, Web3 technology is an inevitability, and I think the other 2.5 is I just think you're going to see companies that are using bits and pieces here and there, and not everything is going to be top to bottom, built on that stack.
Yep.
This is one of my favorite segments that we've had in our series so far, because I think that it is related to every episode we've talked to, and we've seen everybody kind of hitting on it. There's 2 previous episodes that we had with VeChain and Mad V8s that have started to talk about this Web 2.5 concept recently. and they've seen companies that are, coming onto their blockchain, and they're just using it for one section of their business. Whether it's a CPG company or a product company that's trying to use an NFT for demand planning. They're not a Web3 company. They're still a Web2 company that's serving their product. They're good. They're just using the technology to facilitate one part of their business because it's making it more efficient. It's making it, a little bit cheaper. It's making it a little seamless. And so I think that's this transition that we're starting to see here. And we are going to see it, I think, accelerate quickly as people start to realize, I don't need to say I'm Web3. I can, just be using the technology, and it's here in the background. Like you were just mentioning, I believe, Derek, a little bit ago, where you're not even going to realize you're using it. I mean, how many people actually know how your apps work on your iPhone or your Android?
Yeah.
Do you know how it works? No,
Yeah,
you just download the app and you pull it up.
Yeah, I guarantee you, as you're going to different websites, you're not like, oh, this looks like it was built in Python.
Right.
Yeah, you have no
If
clue.
you are, good for you. Good
Yeah.
for you. But that doesn't mean you can't not use the app if you don't understand if it was built in Python or not.
Sure.
And so that's where we're going. And that's where I think, Zach, what you're saying, it's inevitable. And it's really exciting to see you both talking about this. And I think it kind of perfectly leads into this next point here that, Derek, I'm curious to get your opinion on. We've been talking about the evolution of some of these companies and how they're starting to realize that, this isn't an all or nothing.
Mhm.
But what about the data side of things? And how do we actually see, data specifically in the industry of real estate evolving? With new Web3 technologies allowing access to it, allowing people to, display it in new ways. Where do you see data in the real estate industry moving?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's really just starting with what projects like BHR are starting to do. And so by bringing data on chain, which remember, for our company, the blockchain is a single source of truth. And then once we can start to incorporate data from the blockchain, at that point we can start to display some rich experiences. And so, where do I see it going? Like I would love to say, like, one day my county is going to have its own, special blockchain. And when I go to buy a house, it's just going to be recorded on the blockchain and I don't have to wait and, pay all the fees, blah, 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 right? And that is kind of like the dream world. If I were to get a lien on my property, that should be recorded on the blockchain. It's public record. It's something that anyone can go see. And the idea that when I'm buying a house, I have to pay someone hundreds of dollars to go do a lien search on my behalf is it's asinine. All that data is intended to be public data and it's intended to be available, but it's not, just because, our governments and, are not technologically advanced enough. So,
Yes.
Yeah,
not very public when you
yeah, it's public records, right?
Exactly.
Which, like, and I think that's one of the use cases that's really interesting because, when we talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum, we talk about how this is a digital public record system. And a lot of people kind of overlook the fact that public records is a concept that already exists. It's just extremely inefficient. And it's run by people that are going to have a really tough time incorporating this type of thing. But the more that we build now and the easier we make that transition, the more likely we're going to have, individual counties start to run things in parallel and start to run test cases, and, that can start to become more and more adopted. And that's what I'm really excited to start seeing. And as that becomes an eventual truth, doing things like, I want to buy a house, that process where, like, granted, you're still going to have to get your home inspections, but maybe they have enough information on there to where they can say, yep, the roof was done here. I just redid all this. It's a full, top to bottom reconstruction or remodel. This is all the stuff we did, to where you're like, okay, you basically, you handled the plumbing, the electrical, the roof, and I'm good to go. Like, let's skip the inspection. Let's just record this on chain. And now, okay, great. The house is mine, type of thing.
Yeah.
Couple that with, like, lending practices and how someone would actually get a bank loan, which that's its own conversation in itself. But when you can make that process more frictionless, that's just going to facilitate everyone's life.
Yeah. And you as a home buyer, right, as a homeowner, the confidence in what you are exploring just continues to increase, right? Like you actually know what you are buying is what it says it is, and there's not going to be any surprises when you walk in that front door and go turn on your hot water for the first time, right?
Yeah, totally.
And that's every homeowner's dream, right?
Oh.
And so I definitely think that we are getting there, right? We've seen elements of that this year, right? I think I'm reflecting back. There was the first home sold as an NFT, right? That helped to pull together some of that core information. I don't think it's everything, but it definitely was a piece of it. And we're starting to trend in that direction.
Yeah. I think that was in Florida too.
It was.
Yeah.
Which, like,
it might have
we've got
been.
the Miami mayor who's like, really pro blockchain and stuff like that. So I'm really pushing for Florida to become the most
No, totally.
real estate friendly.
Broward County in Florida actually has a mandate to use blockchain for public record. So we had some like early chats with them. And again, it is, 2 points. It's an immense effort. There are so many municipalities, everybody has their own system, but the mere fact that even that county is just raising their hand being like, we get it, it's really exciting. And I think, once you go 0 to 1, it's so much easier to sort of copy paste and keep going from there. So I'm incredibly excited. Just like in the exploration of BHR and really sort of digging in on what we're building, it has been actually quite surprising to us how many of these sort of traditional legacy providers or institutions are actually quite keen on the technology. Once they're educated and can sort of parse the difference between the tech versus crypto, especially, I think you sort of see people's eyes light up and they're like, all we're really talking about here is faster things, more durable things, and extensibility. And like, I think that really drives home for people and they start to understand the value. Again, you just have to decouple it from the sort of stigma that exists right now.
Well, during that exploration, Zach, I mean, I'm curious. We've been talking so much about, visualizing some of this data. Are there any other kind of use cases of Web3 technology that you've seen talk a little bit more about within the real estate industry? Whether it's something related to property management, whether it's something related to the actual transactions of the property. Can you tell me about anything that you might be seeing there? Because it sounds like from Derek's perspective, things are moving quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of teams working on this now. I feel like every time I see sort of a wrap up of the ecosystem and sort of the participants, there's dozens of new players in the space, which is really exciting for us because our hope is that what we're building can just supercharge all of them and get them where they want to go faster so that they don't have to spend the time building just to provide value. On the property management side, some of the things I've seen people really going after are, making sure, sort of what Derek already alluded to, like making sure that inspection reports, maintenance history, all of that kind of stuff is visible. And because it really just helps mitigate so many of the crises that, I was mentioning earlier that come up during the transaction. Storing property title records, I think there's a lot of people interested in sort of the instantaneous title transfer and just making that a clean, easy process because, again, it's one of the more high octane experiences you can have. You have so many providers, so much money on the table, so many ways things can go wrong. So being able to just facilitate that faster, I think, becomes really interesting. On the tokenization of properties themselves, Luke, you are right. There's been actually a couple homes sold as NFTs this year. The way that that's being facilitated right now, because it's not tapped into the actual municipality, is there's an LLC, a sort of an intermediary vehicle, which, still has some redundancies and some slowness, but, it's still a great proof of concept. I'm super excited. Companies like Proppy, I know, have been investigating that a lot. And I think the biggest segment where interest is right now in the application is on the fragmentation side. And I honestly, I think it's one of the more compelling aspects that exists because, right now, especially millennials and sort of the incumbent Gen Z generation, they're looking at this promise of home ownership that they've been fed their whole lives. And then they're looking at, the news, and every article is like, remember when you wanted to buy a home? Like that may not be possible anymore. And that really sucks. Like it is sort of this one of the most stable assets out there. It's something that a lot of people have sort of said, like, here's where I can build generational wealth. Here's where I can just live in general and not be, you know, subservient to renting for the rest of my life. But at least if we're headed in this direction where like ownership of the full asset itself may not be in the cards for everybody, at least there are ways now for, you know, especially marginalized communities that have been just completely excluded from the process or redlined from the process altogether, enabling people to at least just in an instant reach out and say, I've got this much capital available, I can go get a piece of this property here and start getting returns on that. I think that's incredibly compelling. And then
yeah, and hold on, let me just add something to that, because I think there's something really important there, just as a, you know, as a country. And that's, you know, like this concept that like you can't own a piece of real estate. It's going to be out of your price range type of thing. Like what that does to someone, you know, on a mental basis, when you don't have any ownership over a thing. Like think about all the things that you've received in your life where, you know, it wasn't really yours type of thing. Like you don't take good care of it. And you know, people who own real estate and rent to people, they kind of know how tenants treat their house, and it's very different the way that, you know, I treat my house type of thing. And it's, you know, it's something to kind of take pride in, or people naturally kind of take pride when they do own a percentage of a thing and they have the ability to contribute and all of that. And so, you know, this concept that like, okay, I don't have, you know, 100 grand in my savings account or whatever. I don't have the means to make a down payment, but you know what I can do? I can buy, you know, I have a little bit of extra money from my tax return. I can buy 2% of the place where I live, right? And then slowly, you know, maybe by owning 2% of it, your rent goes down, and now you have a little bit more financial freedom. A year later, you buy another 2%, right? So you kind of build that up, and then, you know, as you move, you can transfer that ownership over to a new location. You know, it starts to bring people out of the renter mindset and more into the owner mindset, and that does a number on people, you know, not only for their financial well-being, but also just their well-being. And like, and that's something that I have a lot of passion for. Sorry for just like jumping in there, but like I think it's super underlooked.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's also just like the cherry on top of it, liquidity. You can make that so much faster in and out. You don't have to wait to list your home, sell it, you know, like you can just participate in a way where you're getting access to this asset, but you're not sort of hamstrung by necessarily the same, you know, shackles that come with owning the home itself. But I totally agree, Derek. I think that's super important.
I mean, Luke, that's
I know
ABC said on the last episode.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You guys are all seeing the same thing, and we're seeing this from 3 different entities looking at this through 3 different lenses. And so I think that's something that, you know, our viewers definitely know, that people are seeing this change. You might not be feeling it yet, but it's coming. All of this is really inevitable. It's a matter of when, not if. And so be ready, keep learning. And, you know, that's my advice to you, just because my alarm bells are ringing, because I'm hearing things the 3rd, 4th, and 5th time again from a totally different person.
Yeah. One thing to add to that too, because this is just another innovation that blockchain can offer that just can't exist outside of the blockchain, because, you know, blockchain really enables the programmatic transfer of value. Is, you know, there are things called streaming payments, where you know, there's a lot of different protocols that are working on these streaming payments, but you can tie that to the cash flow of an asset, right? To a property. People are paying rent, you know, they kind of fund their rent payment, and then that slowly gets streamed from the tenant to the owner. And, you know, every second that goes by, the owner owns a little bit more of it, which that is what our rental agreements, you know, are actually doing. Is someone is renting, you know, a unit from me, and then they pay me, and, you know, slowly it becomes mine. But when you get into the capabilities that has, it's really interesting to consider that, you know, you could own something over the weekend and make 2 days worth of rent. You know, it's something that it's like, okay, well, that was just never possible before. You couldn't make those transactions that quickly and receive the income off of those transactions that quickly. And so I think that's really exciting. And I think that's gonna, you know, it's gonna take a while for us to get there, because like, not only do you have to have the property management company, making distributions in a streaming type of system, but then you also have to build the tenant portal to where they can actually pay their rent.
Right.
And so there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen between now and then. But like, I dream for the day where I can just be like, cool, just bought another 1% in that apartment complex down the street. It's doing great. I'm excited. My income next month is going to be greater than the previous month because I'm always increasing my cash flow. That's something that I'm interested in.
And then if you want to take it out to go on a nice vacation, to go
Easy
treat
peasy.
you and your significant other, your family, instant.
Yep.
No wait time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derek, I think you actually started to go down the next route that I was going to present the question to you is like all these innovations are great, right? We're like, this is the desired future state that we all want to see. However, there's always going to be people that are a little bit skeptical, right? They're like, I don't know, I can't really picture that happening. So from your perspective, Derek, what challenges do we need to overcome to really see this, take that next inflection point and get to mass adoption, right? Us four here on the call, we're seeing it. Our audience that's tuning in, they're starting to get the pictures there. But what more do we need to do? And I know you started to hit on a few of those specific examples, but I'm curious, from a high level here, like what are some of those big achievements that need to occur?
Yeah, I mean, I think certain things that we need to kind of just get over is the concept that like we don't want anything to be a security. If you're tokenizing an asset, it can be a security. That's not a problem. Just let it be a security and think with it that way and have the oversight necessary for that. And that's true, especially with the real estate industry where it's like, okay, I wouldn't plan for it not to be, unfortunately, it's just don't go that way. Yeah. But once you kind of get over the fact of like, oh, okay, fine, we can do like a Reg D security or something like that, then then at that point it's like, okay, great. Well, now how do we actually build it? And that's where things start to get interesting. So I think like that is one hurdle that needs to be overcome more on the tokenization side of things. On the more the data side of things, I think getting good data feeds like new oracles and things starting to bring some of that information onto chain. Because once it's on chain, there's just so much that we can do with it in terms of adding multiple different data sources together into making this this really intelligent end product that just benefits everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you bring up the first part about securities, because I know on our previous episode, Matt from ABC FinTech was like, we went with the route of we're going to be compliant from day one. And we're going to be out there saying, hey, we are a security and we know that. Yeah. And that's the route we're going to go with. Right.
Sure. Which is intelligent like that. Like, I think there's just too many people that like came into crypto and then there's kind of this battle between the SEC and crypto. And they're like, okay, whatever I do, it can't be a security. Right. And it's like, well, that's not true. REITs are a thing. Those are securities, right? Like they're very successful. Yes. We can make a much more efficient version of that.
Absolutely.
And like,
And we're starting to see that hammer come down from the SEC, right? We're seeing them be out there with a magnifying glass, turning over every rock that they can. So it's like if you're one of these new entrepreneurs, right? Stick with what currently is out there and the guidance that's provided, and you'll be able to progress without that scrutiny that's really coming down on this. And so, Zach, I want to turn over to you here on, how do you really see BHR contributing to the mass adoption of blockchain technology, and do you see the similar challenges that Derek just kind of displayed to us as well for that adoption, or what are some other challenges that you're seeing? How are you trying to overcome them here?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for us, again, we're just sort of laying the foundation for everybody to build on top of, and inherently what we are building will lead to mass adoption. And whether that's desktop or digital appraisals. I know Fannie and Freddie just put out a warrant about this, saying, let's build a better mousetrap here instead of having an appraiser come to your house and say, okay, yes, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, some neighborhood data, some comps, wasting all that time. Like, we could mitigate 90% of the time and costs for appraisals, which like overnight at sort of like an institutional level would be mammoth in terms of the industry moving forward.
Yeah.
On the lending side, this could power faster approvals, auto refinancing mortgages. On the title side, we already sort of touched on it, like instantaneous title checks and rundowns, better risk evaluation on loans, more accurate and efficient policy underwriting on the insurance side. Like the data will power all of this, and putting it on chain will ensure the durability of it over time, because we don't want to just be a CoStar or a CoreLogic where we are that centralized entity, and the second we need to do something that benefits us, it sort of disrupts the whole system. Like philosophically, we just believe that this data should just be made available. So I think when we were building this from the start, we sort of asked ourselves, like, well, if you had all of this, it was normalized, it was accessible and available and actionable, like what's possible? And the reality is, like, anything is possible. It's a little trite.
Yeah.
I think that that's actually true. And of course, what we were just talking about powering all of these new use cases that are leveraging the technology. In terms of the roadblocks, I think Derek touched on them already, but I think regulations, obviously, big elephant in the room, slowing a lot of things down. I think I sort of said it earlier, but just the marketing of Web3 needs to have sort of a come to Jesus moment of like, if you're speaking to that constituency and you're building infrastructure and tech for that segment, great. Like, let's have that conversation. But if you're building consumer apps and, marketplaces that are going to be used by all of these legacy providers, many of whom barely use technology already, are living in the 1950s in terms of their tech stack. Like, you just need to make that easier for people. And for us, I think one of the other challenges is, I sort of said it earlier, but the privacy side. It's not something that we've gone incredibly deep on, but I think with on-chain, inherently there are sort of privacy considerations, and especially on the real estate side, there's a lot of sensitive information that people would not want out there and available to the world. So those are some of the things that we're certainly thinking about as we go to market here.
Yeah, and Zach, definitely don't get me started on the privacy front. I can dive down that rabbit hole all day long.
Yeah.
And I think, if anything, for our listeners and our audience, that's spoiler alert for future episodes here, because I think privacy, blockchain technology is very important to be at the forefront of discussions.
Well, I know we covered a ton of information over the last hour. And, I have to give a huge shout out to Derek and Zach, because like I warned you all at the beginning, this could have been a 4-hour episode. So thank you for, jamming as much in as we did in this last hour. And I guess I've got one last question for you both. That is something our listeners can hopefully take away from this episode, if they haven't taken away anything already, which I hope you have. I guess, Zach, let's start with you. You have gone through an incredible journey, kind of embracing this Web 2.5 mentality, looking at the world of Web 3. What would you kind of give as advice to an entrepreneur, to a startup that's looking to take the step into exploring Web 3 technology for their business? What recommendations do you have for them?
Sure. I've got a few. I'll keep it quick. Make sure that the blockchain tech is secondary to the value that you're adding, unless the tech itself is the value. But really make sure that you have a use case in mind. I think, especially in the last 18 months, there was this proliferation of, blockchain companies that we're just trying to signal that, like, hey, we've got blockchain, invest in us, because that's where like a lot of, VC was focused. So it's not the case as much anymore, but with any business, just make sure there's real value there and you're not trying to hang your hat on just sort of vanity metrics or vanity tech, as it were. I would say, really know who your customer is, focus on something that's a painkiller, not a vitamin. That's something that we've learned, time and time again. It's really just, make sure what you're building has real value, real use. And, I've spent a lot of time not focused on the Web3 audience, but one of the things I really love about the space is how activated that whole constituency is. And so part of my advice would be lean into it. Just as I'm saying, don't lean into it, I would also say do the opposite with that cohort, because people are so willing to share. They're so willing to collaborate. Everybody is really motivated to see this technology succeed. So there's an immense amount of power in that, and really, embracing that constituency and educating them on what you're building to bring them on board. And then I'd be remiss, this is more from my co-founder than but I think anybody who's building in the space should be reading the smart contracts and learning some of the tech for themselves, not just, again, saying like, here's our science of blockchain, like we are blockchain, like, immerse yourself, understand it, because it's just going to make you more sophisticated as an entrepreneur. But I just, you got to know what you're working with. You need to know the nuts and bolts of it.
I love everything you said there. And I think I am for sure stealing from you moving forward. Focus on something that is a painkiller, not a vitamin. I loved that, because there's so much opportunity in this space for those painkillers. And I think a lot of people just want to bring vitamins here and say, hey, we're going to solve something that you don't need solved, but it's nice. See, check it out. Throw money at us. No, bring value to the space and the technology behind it. Who cares? It facilitates that value. That's what everybody's here for. They're not here because you're doing it with blockchain. They're here because you're solving a real world problem. So I absolutely love that. And I guess, Derek, let's toss it over to you. What are some of the takeaways that you'd give to young entrepreneurs, startups that are looking to step into the world of Web3 and start exploring?
Yeah, it's, once you start getting into the building stage, which, assuming that you're coming more on a technical side of things, whether that's contract development or infrastructure or just, general web design or whatever, I would say one of the first things is it's very easy to just start, tracking every shiny object that comes by. That's kind of the death of a lot of entrepreneurs in this area. Brandon Ramirez from Edgenode, he quoted someone, and I forgot who it was, but he said that most startups fail by suicide, not by homicide, right? And so, you can pretty rapidly burn yourself out if you're just following everything that might possibly be interesting. Like, figure out something you enjoy, figure out something that you want to build, figure out something that adds actual value, and go focus on that thing, right? Grab the team that's necessary in order to build it, and do that thing. And it sometimes gets attractive just because we have kind of this open sea of innovation possible. Like, I would love to go make the real estate product where I attach streams to tenant payment, right? I would love to go do that thing, but put simply, like, that would then kill Data Nexus, and then I'd have to go start this new thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I can probably come up with 9 different things that I could do, and it's like, no, this is what we do, and we enjoy this. Like, we have a great time with it, and that's kind of been a key point of our success is, like, if we have other ideas or those come about, like, we just toss them to other people, and we're like, hey, go build this because I want to use it.
Yeah.
And so so I would say, like, figure out what you want to do and stay focused on that, and don't get 100 different side projects, right? And then after that, just kind of giving a +1 to what Zach said, like, that, the community is something that's very strong. You can there's tons of people who are willing just purely out of interest, and they want to see things do well. And also to further kind of +1 what Zach said, like, just because you want to build something on the blockchain, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that it should be built on the blockchain. Figure out, like, okay, well, what is the actual, real demand? What actually, fixes some type of a problem, and then go build that thing. And so once you have that kind of worked out for yourself, then attack it hard. And there's so many people that are willing to help build. So reach out to us and reach out to different development communities, because it's a lot of fun to work with.
We have just a little bit of fun in this space. I love the line that you just said there, Derek. Most startups die by suicide, not homicide.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's so true.
Yeah.
I mean, Luke and I have been working for startups coming on a decade, which is wild to think about. But that's for another conversation. And I think that we see that all of the time. It's, hey, we're going to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Hold up. Yeah. Slow down. What is it that you were trying to do? Let's focus on this. Let's nail this, get this done before you go start the next project. And I've seen it time and time again, especially in the Web3 space. Everyone try to tackle everything at once. You can only juggle so many things before all of the balls fall. And it's happened over and over again. So learn from the people that came before you and focus. Find something that is actually going to bring value, solve a real world problem, not just a nice to have, and you're going to get the support here from the community. Yeah. I mean, again, Derek, Zach, I can't thank you enough for joining us here, because this has been an incredible episode. I had an absolute blast. I know our listeners did, and I know everybody listening back did. And so I cannot wait to hear how Data Nexus, BHR continue to evolve, because it sounds like they have two incredible leaders at the forefront that have the right mentality and how to bring value to this space and bring value to, the greater world. So thank you for what you guys have been doing. Thank you for joining us here. And we look forward to following your journey, because it looks like it's going to be a fun one. All of our listeners, we hope you enjoyed episode 6 of Bridging the Gap to Web3. We'll hand it over to Chris Haug to bring us home tonight and close things out. Chris, take it away. You're muted, by the way, Chris. Only perfect that you came back and you got that.
Sorry about that. Zach and Derek, thank you. Once again, just blew it out of the water. You guys, gave so much great information, and I am right there on board that it's death by. I've been in the entrepreneurship business for 45 years, and I will say truer words were never spoken than it's death by suicide, not homicide.
Yep.
Absolutely. And all I can say is thank you, gentlemen. Connor, Luke, thank you for an incredible event. Please, everyone, feel free to reach out to any one of us. We will be doing a summary this evening, and we'll be launching we'll be sending out a link to the video in case you want to look at it again. Hope everybody will stay tuned, because we have a lot of even greater things to discuss coming forward. With that, everybody, thank you and have a good evening.